pace was. They didn't seem to know that they could throw their backs out or cause their bone-on-bone knees to act up. But maybe they too will get there one day. And seeing the varied ethnic groups represented throughout the ranks was very rewarding. When I was on active duty, the Army was mainly a white soldier, black soldier experience. But now, thank goodness, the U.S. military in general and the Army in particular looks more like an international settlement. On this past Wednesday, for the first time, I looked at those soldiers entirely differently. I actually saw potential enemies. I saw what could turn out to be supporters of Black Lives Matter alongside supporters of Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, all joined together by a common uniform, an oath, and a constitution to which that oath is sworn. And I never felt this way before, not until I read remarks by retired General Officer Stephen Anderson, Paul Eaton, and Antonio Tagliabue. These three retired general officers state that there is a scenario that could play out on or after November 12th, 2024, the date the next presidential election is held, that could lead to a second American Civil War. These revelations made me, for the first time, see my fellow retirees and active duty comrades differently. I saw potential enemies. And I'd be untruthful if I said that being a Civil War buff had nothing to do with my new feelings. And as a Civil War buff, I harken back to that fearful year of 1861 when the Confederate States of America fired on the United States of America at Fort Sumter, South Carolina. After the attack, U.S. military officers had to decide which side they would fight for. Most stayed with the United States military, but a very large number of well-trained, battle-tested officers resigned their U.S. military commissions and took on the uniform of the Confederate States of America. Not the least of these officers were Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee. As I walked through the commissary and post exchange on Wednesday, noticing all the fatigue-clad soldiers going about their shopping chores, I almost wondered out loud, will you be the next Lee or Grant? Or maybe the next Longstreet or Chamberlain? Gary Wickersham, an 80-year-old Vietnam-era Army veteran, was sentenced to house arrest for entering a restricted building and disorderly conduct, making him the oldest person to be arrested in the Capitol riot. This guy is in my cohort. So needless to say, it was a weird feeling to contemplate going to war against my comrades at arms. But I'm afraid this is where we find ourselves today. This is no longer a political exercise, folks. This is the real deal. So let's hope that Generals Anderson, Eaton, and Tagliabue fears don't come to fruition, that the presidential election on November the 12th, 2024, goes off without a hitch, and America can once again be correct in laying claim to the title of the world's best and strongest democracy. But in the former UK Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli's words, as he used to say, let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Well, that's a piece of my mind this morning, folks. If you'd like to have a piece of your mind shared with our listeners, email your piece to ncblackandgold@gmail.com. Now, let's start with this week's show. Ed, what's first in the house?
Not that the year was bad enough, right? No, I mean, on a serious note, you know, I actually was right down the street from you on Wednesday. I was in Fayetteville, and I thought weirdly, I thought the same thing. I was thinking about all those soldiers that I saw and how many of them were actually down for the cause, because we started out the year nearly on the first day of the year on January 6th with the insurrection. And for me, you know, that's my top story of the year. I know we've got coronavirus still. We've had all kinds of stuff that happening, but we nearly lost the democracy right when the year started. And there's a lot of people out there who would still be willing to overthrow the democracy. There's a movement called the Redoubt movement that's out in Idaho. It's basically a rehash of the Aryan nations, and and there's all these different groups. You mentioned Oath Keepers and all these people, but you also mentioned, though, that they have fully infiltrated the military, which is very dangerous. And on a serious note, I can't think about this year, 2021, without thinking about 1/6. It frames everything for me, including COVID, because we are in the situation with COVID because we had a crazy man as president. And so as we continue to wrap this year up and think about all the stories from the year, I can't help but think about 1/6. I think about it every day.
Herb, I know you have some year-ending stories, some of which you talked about as far as Ed has mentioned about 1/6 COVID and the Georgia special elections, Afghanistan. They're just too many to enumerate right now. But why don't you give us a couple on that's near the top on your list that come to mind about the top stories of 2021?
Well, Val, I think you started us out on a very sober note, and I think it is a note that we should take seriously. Ed talked about January 6th. A recent NBC news poll from the 1st of November indicated that roughly 18% of Americans feel that patriots need to rise up to rectify the wrongful elections that have occurred in this country, most notably with the president. And in that number, they found that roughly 30% of Republicans feel that there was a steal of the democracy, 17% of independents, 11% of Democrats. And then when you look at the threats that we see to elected officials around the country, particularly those who have expressed some opposition to the Donald Trump message, when you look at the legislative attacks on the election process and on those individuals who have been elected to manage the elections that are going on around the country, when you look at the fact that in Congress today, there are elected officials who are trying to bring guns onto the floor of the House and of the Senate. You have congressional representatives threatening physical acts of violence against other elected members of the of Congress. You have the same thing occurring in state legislatures around the country. You have this whole notion of, you mentioned it earlier, ex-military leaders who have expressed their concern about what might happen after 2024, November 2024, but also the fact that now the Pentagon is actively going through its ranks to make some determinations about loyalty of those soldiers who have sworn allegiance to the United States. It's more than a notion, and it is something that we need to pay close attention to, and I think it's optimistic to think that November 2024 will be the dividing date. I think it might even occur before then. There is this notion of already the coup is being planned, and the efforts are still underway to get states to renege on the votes from their states. So it's a troubling mass, and I know we've had a lot of eventful things to occur during the year, and all of them cause us a lot of angst. But this is something that is carrying over, and we need to pay serious attention to it, because it can end the democracy as we know it. And for African Americans and Latinos and people of color, the thing that we must hold dear and fight for is saving the democracy that we have in this country, because otherwise we will not know what is going to happen to us.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Ed, I know we talked about the special elections in Georgia for the Georgia Senate and Afghanistan and the Supreme Court cases regarding abortion, that kind of thing. But I want to skip down, if I can, for the last few minutes of this segment and talk about the recent trials, because we just had one to conclude on this past Thursday, the Potter trial. And there were four, Chauvin, Rittenhouse, McMackles, and Potter. Which one of those four jumped out at you, and how do you feel about them collectively?
Well, as far as having the biggest impact, I think the Chauvin trial will, because it was so stark. I mean, and then I had a chance to meet the Floyd family and do some work with them, and I actually spent time with them on the day when the verdict came out. So it was really palpable for me because I was around them when the verdict came out, and I think it moved a lot of people in a different way. The Potter trial is as important, though, but it didn't get as much attention. I think Rittenhouse is important in the opposite way, in that it got attention, but this guy walked. And so every one of these trials, I think, illuminates a lot about America at this place and time, that you can convict some police officers, but it's still hard. And I'm still afraid that the Rittenhouse trial may have the biggest impact because it may allow people to think they can be vigilantes and take the law into their own hands.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that Ed has said. To be honest with you, I was surprised with the Potter verdict. I thought that the jury would hang. They did not. They convicted her both first-degree manslaughter and second-degree manslaughter, and immediately remanded her to jail to be sentenced, where she is facing up to 15 years in prison for the death of Daunte Wright. All of them are consequential court cases, and they affect us in so many different ways. But I think that there's still a measure of hope that when we look at juries in Minnesota, well, both of these were Keith Ellison prosecutions in Minnesota, that there are fair-minded people who can give to these cases a serious review and reach a just verdict, although justice in this case will never be obtained. It's sad, but it is a reality, and it's good to see that people are being held accountable for their misconduct, not their conduct, but misconduct.
And that could not be more truthful. We're going to take a small pause for the calls in just a few, but before we go and get on some of the other longer-winded things, I wanted to mention a few passings that we all shared during the year. Congressman Al C. Hastings was a good fraternity brother of mine, and we'll leave that right there. Golf icon Lee Elder, and another icon, fraternity brother of mine also, Mr. John Cheney. And I think a fraternity brother of my good friend Ed Clark, Leon Spinks. The two of you are tied in there together. Marvin Hagler, another boxer, and another. I wasn't trying to just go get